in the windswept hills of West Cornwall, where the Atlantic whispers secrets to the rugged cliffs. The ancient tor of Carn Galva stood as a sentinel over the villages of Zennor and Morvah. Its granite outcrops, weathered by centuries of storms, gleamed under the pale Cornish sun, casting long shadows that danced across the heather-strewn moors. Here, in this wild and timeless landscape, lived a giant unlike any other in the old tales, a gentle soul named Galvaban, whose heart was as vast as the ocean and as warm as the summer sun. Galvaban was a towering figure, his head brushing the low-hanging clouds, his shoulders broad enough to carry a fishing boat. His skin was the color of the granite he loved, speckled with lichen-like freckles, and his eyes, a deep mossy green, sparkled with kindness. Unlike the fearsome giants of legend who devoured children and ground bones for bread, Galvaban was a protector, a guardian of the land and its people. He had lived on Carn Galva for centuries, his presence woven into the fabric of the moors like the ancient stone walls that crisscrossed the fields below. The villagers knew of him through whispered stories, passed down by their grandparents' dailies, of a giant who balanced massive logan stones to rock himself to sleep, his snores rumbling like distant thunder, and who watched over the villagers with a quiet, steadfast care. Galvaban spent his days in simple joys. He would stack the great granite boulders of Carn Galva into towering cairns, arranging them with the precision of an artist, each stone a testament to his love for the land. At night, he would lie on his back, the stars his blanket, and trace the constellations with a massive finger, murmuring their names in a language older than the hills themselves. He knew the seasons by the scent of the air, the briny temps of spring, the honeyed warmth of summer, the crisp bite of autumn, and the icy stillness of winter. He watched the villagers from afar, their tiny figures toiling in the fields, their laughter carried on the wind, and he felt a deep, unspoken kinship with them. But he kept his distance, fearing his sighs would frighten them, his footsteps alone enough to shake the earth. One golden afternoon in late summer, a boy named Tom, no more than 10 years old, decided to seek out the giant of Carn Galva. Tom was a wiry lad with a mop of chestnut hair and eyes as bright as the sea on a clear day. He lived in Zennor with his mother, a weaver, and his father, a fisherman, in a thatched cottage near the church. Tom had grown up on stories of Galvaban, told by his grandmother as they sat by the hearth on stormy nights. "He's not like the giants in the old tales," she would say, her voice soft with reverence. "Galvaban is a friend to the land, a keeper of its secrets. If you ever meet him, child, show him kindness, and he'll show you wonders in return." Tom's curiosity burned brighter than his fear, and so, with a small sack of bread and cheese slung over his shoulder, he set off for Carn Galva, the hill looming like a sleeping giant itself against the horizon. The climb was steep, the path winding through gorse and bracken, the air thick with the hum of bees and the scent of wild thyme. Tom's heart pounded as he neared the summit, the stories of Galvaban swirling in his mind. What if the giant wasn't as kind as his grandmother said? What if he mistook Tom for a thief or a troublemaker? But as he crested the hill, his fears melted away. There, sitting cross-legged among the boulders, was Galvaban, his massive hands carefully placing a stone atop a cairn, his face lit with a gentle smile. The giant's presence was awe-inspiring, yet there was a softness to him, a quiet grace that put Tom at ease. "Hello," Tom called, his voice small but brave, echoing across the Torah. Galvaban turned, his green eyes widening in surprise, then softening with delight. "Well now," he rumbled, his voice like the rolling of waves over pebbles. "What's a little one like you doing on my hill?" Tom stood his ground, puffing out his chest. "I'm Tom from Zennor, and I've come to meet you, giant of Carn. My gran says you're kind, and I want to be your friend." Galvaban chuckled, a sound that made the ground tremble ever so slightly, and he patted the ground beside him. "Come, Tom of Zennor, sit with me, and let's share stories." From that day, a friendship blossomed between the boy and the giant, as unlikely as a daisy growing in a storm. Tom would visit Galvaban every few days, bringing bits of bread or a handful of blackberries, and Galvaban would share the wonders of the world with him. He taught Tom the names of the stars Orion, the hunter, the plough, the North Star that guided sailors home, and how to read the seasons in the flight of birds, and see how the swallows dart low before a rain. Galvaban would say, pointing to the sky with a finger as big as Tom's arm, "They feel the storm coming in their wings." Tom listened, wide-eyed, soaking in the giant's wisdom, his fear of the unknown replaced by a deep love for the land. Galvaban's kindness extended beyond Tom to the villagers below. When the river near Morvah swelled after a spring deluge, threatening to wash away the only bridge connecting the village to its fields, Galvaban strode down from Carn Galva, his footsteps leaving deep prints in the earth. The villagers watched in awe as he lifted massive boulders with ease, placing them in the river to form a sturdy dam, then rebuilt the bridge with logs and stones, his hands working with a tenderness that belied his size. When the fields of Zennor grew choked with gorse, making it impossible to plant barley, Galvaban cleared the land in a single afternoon, uprooting the prickly bushes and piling them into a bonfire that lit the night sky, the villagers dancing around it in celebration. But Galvaban's favorite moments were the games he played with Tom. They would race across the moors, Tom's laughter ringing out as he darted between the giant's legs, Galvaban pretending to stumble in mock defeat. One day, they invented a new game, tossing a boulder back and forth, seeing how far they could throw it. Galvaban, caught up in the joy of the moment, tossed the boulder a bit too hard, and it landed with a thud just a few feet from Tom, sending up a cloud of dust. Tom yelped, stumbling backward, his face pale with fright. Galvaban's heart sank, his massive hands trembling as he dropped to his knees. "Oh Tom, my lad, I didn't mean to scare you," he cried, his voice thick with worry. "I forget my own strength sometimes." Tom, though shaken, saw the genuine sorrow in the giant's eyes. He dusted himself off and ran to Galvaban, wrapping his small arms around the giant's finger. "It's all right, Galvaban," he said, his voice steady. "I know you'd never hurt me on purpose. Let's just be more careful next time." The villagers, who had heard the commotion and come running, saw the scene and understood. They gathered around, their voices warm with reassurance. "You're our friend Galvaban," said Old Man Jory, a fisherman with a weathered face. "We trust you with our lives." From that day, Galvaban was more cautious, but his bond with the villagers grew even stronger, his presence a comfort rather than a fear. As the years passed, Galvaban became a beloved figure in Zennor and Morvah. He helped with every harvest, lifting hay bales as if they were feathers, and carved a new well in the hillside when a drought parched the land, his massive hands digging deep into the earth until water bubbled forth. The children of the villagers, inspired by Tom, would climb Carn Galva to visit him, bringing him daisy chains and seashells, which he wore proudly in his lichen-flecked hair. At night, he would sit with the villagers around a bonfire, telling stories of the ancient days when the Moors were young, his voice weaving magic into the air as the stars twinkled above. But time, even for a giant, is not eternal. One winter, when the gales howled fiercer than ever and the sea roared with fury, Galvaban felt a deep weariness settle into his bones. He knew his days on Carn Galva were drawing to a close. He called Tom, now a young man with a family of his own, to his side. "My time here is ending, lad," he said, his voice soft as the wind. "But I've lived a good life, thanks to you and your people. Promise me you'll keep the stories alive, the stars, the seasons, the love we shared." Tom, tears in his eyes, nodded. "I promise, Galvaban. We'll never forget you." Galvaban passed that night, lying on his beloved hill, the stars his final companions. The villagers mourned deeply, their hearts heavy with loss, but they honored his memory in a way that would endure. They carved a great stone seat from one of the boulders he had loved, placing it at the summit of Carn Galva, where it overlooked the villages and the sea beyond. They etched his name into the stone, along with the words, "Galvaban, friend of the Moors." And every year on the longest day of summer, they gathered there to tell his stories, their voices rising into the sky like a song. Even now, on quiet nights when the moon bathes Carn Galva in silver light, the villagers say you can feel Galvaban's spirit watching over them. The Logan stones he once balanced still rock gently in the wind, as if he's humming himself to sleep. And the stars he loved seem to shine a little brighter over Zennor and Morvah. Galvaban, the friendly giant of Carn Galva, remains a guardian of the land, his legacy a testament to the power of kindness, friendship, and the enduring bond between a giant and the people who loved him. Many thanks for treading this tale's gigantic path. And now, our second gigantic story. The gentle giant of Snowdonia. In the heart of Eryri, where the jagged peaks of Snowdonia pierce the sky and the winds whisper ancient secrets, the name Idris Gore was once spoken with dread. Idris, a giant of immense stature, was said to have carved the mountain Cader Idris's chair with his own hands, a throne from which he gazed upon the world below. The villagers of Lanbaris, nestled in the shadow of the mountains, told tales of his wrath, how his footsteps caused the earth to quake, how his roars summoned storms, and how his hunger drove him to steal sheep and cattle in the dead of night. Yet these stories were born of fear, not truth. For Idris was a giant of a different sort of lonely soul, who longed for companionship, his heart as vast as the mountains he called home. For centuries, Idris had lived in solitude. His only friends the stars that glittered above and the winds that sang through the valleys. From his perch on Cader Idris, he watched the villagers below. There lives a tapestry of laughter, love, and community things he had never known. The flickering lights of their hearths, the songs of their festivals, and the chatter of their children filled him with a quiet yearning. But every time he ventured near, the villagers fled, their screams echoing through the hills, their tales of terror growing with each retelling. Idris, with his towering frame, shaggy hair the color of storm clouds, and eyes like polished slate, was a figure of nightmare in their minds. And so he retreated to his mountain, resigned to a life of solitude, his only solace the knowledge he had gleaned from the land and sky secrets of the seasons, the stars, and the earth's deep rhythms. It was the autumn of 642, a time when the leaves of Snowdonia turned to fiery hues of amber and crimson, and the air grew sharp with the promise of winter. The villagers of Lambris were preparing for the harvest festival, their barns brimming with barley and their spirits high with anticipation. But the skies had other plans. For days, dark clouds gathered over the peaks, their edges tinged with an ominous green. The wind howled through the valleys, carrying the scent of rain and the rumble of distant thunder. The elders, wise in the ways of the weather, warned of a storm unlike any they had seen, a tempest that could swell the rivers and flood the village, washing away homes, crops, and lives. As the first drops fell, Idris felt the storm's fury from his mountain perch. The rain lashed against his broad shoulders, and the wind tugged at his shaggy hair. But he stood unmoved, his gaze fixed on the village below. He saw the villagers scurrying to secure their homes, their faces etched with worry. The river Scient, which wound through Lamberis, was already rising, its waters churning with mud and debris. Idris knew what would come next, deluge that would sweep through the valley, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake. For the first time in centuries, he felt a stirring in his heart, a need to act, to protect the people he had watched for so long, even if they feared him. Descending the mountain with careful steps, Idris moved through the storm, his massive feet sinking into the sodden earth. He gathered boulders the size of cottages, uprooted trees with roots as thick as a man's waist, and hauled them to the river's edge. The villagers, peering through their shuttered windows, caught glimpses of his shadowy form in the lightning's flash, a towering figure moving with purpose, his silhouette both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Some whispered prayers, fearing he had come to destroy them, while others watched in silent wonder as he began to build. With hands that could crush stone, Idris worked through the night, piling boulders and logs to form a dam across a narrow bend in the river. The rain soaked his fur-like hair, and the wind howled in his ears, but he did not falter. By dawn, as the storm reached its peak, the dam held strong, diverting the floodwaters into a nearby ravine and sparing the village from ruin. Exhausted, Idris sat on the riverbank, his chest heaving, his eyes fixed on the village below. The rain began to ease, and the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the valley. For the first time in his long life, Idris felt a flicker of hope. The villagers emerged from their homes at first light, expecting to find their fields underwater and their livelihoods lost. Instead, they found the river Scient tamed, its waters redirected by a massive dam of stone and timber, a structure no human hands could have built. Whispers spread through the crowd as they gathered at the river's edge, their eyes tracing the giant footprints that led up the mountain. "It was Idris," said old Gwyn, the village storyteller, his voice trembling with awe. "The giant of Cader Idris has saved us." At first, fear lingered in their hearts, for the tales of Idris's terror were deeply ingrained. But gratitude began to outweigh their dread, and a group of villagers, led by a young shepherd named Ira, decided to seek him out. Ira, with her fiery red hair and fearless spirit, had always been curious about the giant, her childhood filled with stories of his supposed wrath. Yet, she had also heard whispers of his wisdom, of how he knew the stars and the seasons, and how he had once been a friend to the ancient druids. Armed with a basket of freshly baked bread and a jug of mead, she led the group up the mountain, their steps tentative but determined. They found Idris on Cader Idris, sitting on a slab of rock that served as his throne, his massive hands resting on his knees. He looked down at them, his slate-grey eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and wariness. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air, the villagers clutching their gifts, unsure of what to say. It was Ira who stepped forward, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "We've come to thank you, Idris," she said, holding out the basket. "You saved our village, our homes, our families. We were wrong to fear you." Idris blinked, his expression softening. He reached down, his massive hand dwarfing the basket as he took it gently, careful not to crush the bread within. "I only wished to help," he rumbled, his voice like the rolling of thunder, yet warm with sincerity. "I have watched you for so long, and I wished to be part of your world, even for a moment." The villagers exchanged glances, their fear melting away as they saw the loneliness in his eyes. They sat with him that day, sharing stories and laughter, the first threads of friendship weaving between them. In the weeks that followed, Idris became a regular visitor to Llanberis, his massive form no longer a source of terror but a welcome sight. The villagers, eager to repay his kindness, invited him to help with the harvest, and Idris proved to be an invaluable ally. With his strength, he could clear a field of stones in an hour, carry bushels of grain that would have taken 10 men to lift, and uproot stubborn trees to make way for new farmland. But it was not just his strength that endeared him to the village, it was his knowledge. Idris had lived for centuries, and in that time, he had learned the secrets of the land and sky. He taught the farmers how to read the weather in the clouds, predicting rain or drought with uncanny accuracy. He showed them where to find the sweetest springs and the richest soil, guiding them to hidden valleys where wild herbs grew in abundance. At night, he gathered the villagers around a bonfire on the slopes of Cader Idris, pointing out constellations and telling stories of the star tales of ancient heroes and celestial beings that had watched over the world since time began. The villagers listened, enraptured, their fear of the giant replaced by a deep respect and affection. The children of Llanberis, in particular, adored Idris. They would run to him whenever he appeared, their laughter echoing through the valley as they climbed onto his broad shoulders or clung to his massive arms. Idris, who had never known the joy of family, found himself smiling, rare gentle smile that softened his rugged features. He carved wooden toys for them with his bare hands, shaping tiny horses and boats from fallen branches, and told them stories of the mountains' history of the druids who had once walked these hills, and the creatures that still lingered in the shadows. The children called him Tadq Idris, Grandfather Idris, and the name stuck, a testament to the bond that had grown between the giant and the village. As winter approached, the villagers decided to honor Idris with a festival, a celebration of the friendship that had transformed their lives. They called it the Festival of the Giant, and it was to be held on the first full moon of December, when the snow dusted the peaks of Snowdonia and the air sparkled with frost. The village square was adorned with garlands of holly and ivy, and a great bonfire was lit, its flames casting a warm glow over the gathered crowd. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, fresh bread and honeyed cakes, and the air was filled with the sound of music, fiddles and flutes playing lively tunes that echoed through the valley. Idris, dressed in a cloak of woven wool gifted by the villagers, sat at the center of the celebration, his massive frame surrounded by children who clambered onto his lap, their faces alight with joy. Ira, now a dear friend, presented him with a crown of woven branches, a symbol of his place in their community. "You've given us so much, Idris," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "Not just your strength, but your wisdom, your kindness, and your heart. You're one of us now." The villagers cheered, raising their mugs of mead in a toast to their gentle giant. As the night wore on, Idris shared a new story, one he had never told before. He spoke of his own origins, of how he had been born from the earth itself, a child of the mountains created to guard the land. But he had been alone, his purpose unfulfilled, until the day he saved Lamp. "You have given me a family," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And for that, I will protect you always." The villagers, moved by his words, vowed to honor his legacy, ensuring that the tale of Idris Gore would be told for generations, not as a monster, but as a friend. Years passed, and Idris remained a steadfast guardian of Llanberis, his presence a comforting constant in the ever-changing seasons. He helped the village through droughts and floods, taught them to thrive in harmony with the land, and watched as generations of children grew into adults, their own children climbing onto his shoulders in turn. But giants, even those born of the earth, are not immortal, and one winter, as the first snow fell, Idris felt his strength begin to wane. He knew his time was near, but he was not afraid, for he had found the family he had always longed for. On his final day, Idris climbed Cader Idris one last time, the villagers gathering at the base of the mountain to bid him farewell. He sat on his stone throne, the wind whispering through the peaks, and closed his eyes, a peaceful smile on his face. As his spirit faded, the mountain itself seemed to mourn, a soft tremor shaking the earth, a final goodbye from the gentle giant. The villagers, their hearts heavy with grief, carved his name into the stone of Cader Idris, a monument to his legacy. Many thanks for treading this tale's gigantic path. If it's these giants have gripped you, like, follow, subscribe, and comment below.